I think the big thing is the growing need for having health and safety programs in order to qualify for work. You're seeing this increasingly in oil and gas sector, commercial construction, and it's starting to grow in other industries as well. And the reality is
Welcome to the Business Ownership Podcast, brought to you by Awareness Strategies, helping you navigate the waters between entrepreneurship and ownership. Hey there, peeps. This is Michelle Nedelec, and I'm super excited that you're here today because I'm here with my most amazing guest, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here with us today.
thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So let everybody know a highlight of who you are and what you do for business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am an occupational health and safety professional, which is maybe a highlight for me, not so much for others. But I started my own consulting business less than a year ago when I was needing to get out of my current job. I needed to find somewhere a little more positive for myself. But I was also seeing a need to support smaller, growing, incredibly talented trade services and businesses alike with their health and safety needs. It's something that stresses a lot of people out and creates a lot of frustration and confusion. And I have found that it doesn't do that for me. I've figured it out, I think, as I can. And I like to take the pressure off of those small and growing businesses and put them at ease by helping them write documents, procedures, audit, all the things that nobody wants to do. I will take it on.
Nice. Well, we will totally get into all of that in a moment, but let's back up the bus a little bit. How did you get into health and safety as your thing?
Well, it's not a very glamorous story. I actually I was in my early 20s and I hadn't, gone into any sort of education or career path. I was still finding my way as a very young adult. And I started in a new relationship where him and a lot of his friends were making a ton of money in Alberta working in the trades. And I sort of thought, I don't think anyone's going to hire me to build something or break something down, just a little pipsqueak. And so I looked around to find out a different way that I could get involved in the industry, which is how I landed in health and safety.
Nice. Yes, it is very much a needed industry for sure. So when you got in there, kind of what to you was appealing about health and safety and kind of like what did you start to find yourself loving about your job?
I think maybe I didn't know it at the time, but as I've had some time to reflect on it, I think I like the component of taking care of people in a
Nice.
sense. And just sort of when they don't necessarily think about themselves, they're thinking about getting the job done or getting it done fast. Just reminding them that they matter and that there's a way to go about it that's going to keep them safe. And so I really like making sure that that's front and center for everyone. And I think that's what drew me to it is just kind of being like maybe the mom or the caregiver on site or around the workplace.
Right? Go on. It's like you guys are all gonna kill yourselves because doing this. There's many times I've seen that, and I think it's just guys get together and they act like guys. Maybe they just need
Yeah.
somebody to kind of oversee them sometimes. Totally agree.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think they get a bit distracted by the
mhm,
objective of getting
yep.
the job done and delivering, which is incredible. But sometimes it's just important to remind them that nobody wants the job done with you on the injured list or worse.
Exactly. Nice. So when it comes to kind of the work that you do, who would you say kind of is your ideal client? Who gets the most out of what you do?
Yeah, there's a bit of two different sides to that coin. So the one would be potentially newer or growing trade services type industries. And so they're really finding themselves in that spot where they want to get more work essentially, but they're finding they're being blocked by red tape of not having policies and procedures and certifications in place. And so it's kind of tricky because it takes some time and investment to build those policies and procedures, but they're trying to grow their revenue, but they can't access the work. It's a little chicken and egg. And so I can support them without having to hire someone full time. And so it's those growing companies that have big aspirations. And the other side of that is a role that I have found myself in my most recent before I started this an overworked admin, whether that be an entry level or executive or a supervisor even, because a lot of the times in those growing companies, safety ends up tasked to someone who maybe didn't pick it for themselves, and so they're wearing a lot of hats. They have a lot of responsibilities, and at the end of the day, one person can't do everything. And so if you're seeing someone with a role like that, that's often someone that I can support quite a bit.
Nice. So when it comes to people kind of what's going on in the industry, let's put it that way, that the layperson or the person going into that industry doesn't realize, like, what are the shocks to the system that they're
Yeah.
going, oh, I need to do that.
I think the big thing is the growing need for having health and safety programs in order to qualify for work. You're seeing this increasingly in oil and gas sector, commercial construction, and it's starting to grow in other industries as well. And the reality is it's not just something you can throw together when you're putting a bid together or have a job to make. It's something that does require ongoing maintenance, sort of like a routine of completing activities like inspections and meetings. And so it takes a lot of time and it's a continual process. It's not so much anymore like, here's a beautifully packaged safety binder that's one and done, and you get to sit it on a shelf where it's going to collect dust. They want to see these living, breathing programs and showing that our words are meeting our actions and vice versa. And so I think that's a big shock, especially as companies try to grow and work for new clients.
Nice. Are there some things that you kind of think are common sense, obvious, that in the industry are like are not so commonplace or maybe not so well understood?
I definitely try to remove the phrase common sense from my vocabulary. I think
Smart.
for one, is the reality is I wouldn't have a job
Right.
if common sense was an effective means. And the reason that I try not to use it or I encourage people not to think about it that way is that common sense is a product of our experience. And so when we're new to an industry, new to a job, new materials, new equipment, all the time there's new technology, we don't have that experience. And so, therefore, we have no common sense. So, a lot of the times, I think there is a lot of value to learning from experience. And that's where I see things like on the job shadowing and coaching and peer programs be really effective. But in those programs, we have to emphasize that new people coming in, even from one company to another, because there may be, different norms and different expectations, that people don't know what they don't know.
Absolutely. So when it comes to kind of the different industries, is there different aspects to your job? Are there different things you need to learn? Or do you find that what you do is fairly kind of consistent regardless of the industry?
Um, Both. So a lot of the ways that we go about things, whether it's assessing a job or then assessing it for hazards and controls, those processes or emergency planning, they're fairly consistent and we can apply the same principles. But the difference sometimes being is the legislation that we're having to follow. So whether it's something that's federally regulated or based on province, and then there are different industry standards. So the biggest difference is just making sure that we're up to date on those standards and regulations and understanding the differences. But how we apply the principles and the practices can generally go across industries.
Right. Well, I know there's a lot of things that Alberta is known for a lot of people coming here to work. And I mean, to me, the funniest thing is always and always will be the allure that frozen pipe has to somebody and that they always want to either touch it or lick it. It's like, it's probably a really bad idea, but nobody warns them of it. They can see the look on their face and they're like, no, we're going to let that happen. Other
Yeah,
things going on and yeah, go ahead.
I think sometimes there can be maybe a little bit of a hazing moment there or things like that. I mean, it can be very tough industries to break into and, create that camaraderie. But yeah, if nobody's told them not to do it or they don't have the experience of it, there's quite an allure. And you learn from experience, whether that being seeing something, hearing something, or unfortunately doing something. So it's
Right.
part of
Well,
it
and
for
it
sure.
is very different working in, say, a desert atmosphere versus a winter atmosphere versus tundra, and all of which can be
Mhm.
experienced in Alberta, which is kind of strange. Are there anything else that you've noticed that is kind of typically, say, Albertan or typically Calgarian that other people aren't kind of aware of?
That's a good question. I think what I've noticed is that we have a really busy construction industry here in Calgary, particularly with a lot of newcomers to Alberta, and we're seeing there's a lot of difference between the commercial and residential side of construction. And so when we have people that are moving from one to another potentially, they're not really sure where their standards lie. And so that's something that I've noticed the biggest challenge and the biggest difference is that those two industries tend to have some different expectations. I think another piece is similar to what you said. Things like weather, because of the weather here and how fast it changes, I see a really difficult time managing scheduling and timelines and creating intense amounts of pressure on getting work done and the leniency towards maybe wanting to fast track that and capitalize on good weather or I don't know what good weather is anymore here, whether it's we want it to be hot or we want it to be cold, depending on the work that we're
Right.
doing. There is sometimes those snags and struggles with scheduling operations and really being mindful of safety practices. And I think with our weather fluctuation, that's a really big factor.
Right? And for those of you who don't know, the common phrase around here is wait 20 minutes and the weather will change. And it almost always does. And it can be anything from as weird as it sounds. Yes, we've had winter all 12 months of the year before. It doesn't stay, but we've had it. We get incredible wind gusts sometimes, depending on where your work site is. It's and depending on the materials that you're working with can affect things. Is there kind of when it comes to kind of the safety and regulations, I'm assuming a lot of new businesses go, well, why don't you just tell us what the regulations are and we will comply with it? Why do we have to come up with our own?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a part of it where you want to leave it to an expert or you want somebody who can sort of take on that responsibility as well. And I also think it's the most, even though there are legislation changes, it is the most consistent thing that we can go to. And so I always, the way that I work and the way that I encourage others to work is like, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Go to the source, find the information, the regulations that they're requiring. You also want to get a little bit of industry background because you may be held to a higher standard if everybody, all of your peers are doing something differently or above the regulation. But yeah, that's definitely the way to go. There's no sense in having, blank page syndrome or someone in an office sitting there going, so how did they put up that wall or how did they pour that concrete and imagining the process in front of you. Go to the experts and where the information is for you. And yeah, you can absolutely kind of rely on that expertise and the regulation to build your program.
Nice. So when it comes to working with you, what does that kind of onboarding process look like? How do you usually work with your clients? What expectations do you have of them before you get there, if any? What kind of conversations are going on?
Yeah, it can depend on where they are at. So if they're going from the bare bones, they have nothing in place, they're brand new, or they're just getting started. Sometimes that's almost a little bit easier than if they have maybe some existing documentation that's built up over time. So in that case, if they do have stuff, we kind of go through like a baseline audit. I do it, they don't do it. I review all their documents and I ask them what their goals are. So, are we looking to get a core certification, which is where we go through an audit process with a third party, regulatory body to make sure that our standards meet the expectations? Or is it a little bit different for our goals? Are we just looking to make sure, that our employees are valued and they are taken care of and we're making sure our practices are effective and efficient? So depending on what the driving factor is may change our course of action. If we're starting from the beginning, we don't have any content. I tend to work a little bit backwards than maybe some of my peers in the industry, where it's very easy to sit down and go, great, you have nothing. Let's write you a 250-page manual, which I have done. And it is awfully boring. And like I say, it's a bit of that staring at a screen going, I can imagine what they do as a general contractor. And we, fill in the blanks from there. But I found it's more effective to get them started on some of the core forms. Let's start with a daily hazard assessment. That's reviewing your job and your site every single day before you start. putting down your tasks, what are the hazards, and how are we going to control them? And we can train through that process depending on what their experience is and their comfort level. But the reality is that I take that information and I build the safety program backwards from there. They're giving me exactly what I need to know about what they're doing every single day and what's going to be part of their safety program. So I like to work that way rather than, sitting down and just writing and writing and writing and handing them, all of these documents to read through.
Right. So you mentioned that mentorship was kind of one of the ways to get the information from one individual to another and documentation. People usually videotape it and get their team to watch them. Like, what are some of the other ways that they're incorporating the information, or do they just send home a 200-page document? Say, go read this tonight.
I used to do training and we would sit and watch them read 200 pages, and that was just as painful for me as it was for them. So I immediately didn't like that. That was when I first started in the industry. There are some video training, and being able to take that in from, like I said, a supervisor or a peer and someone that you're going to be working with is really effective. I do find that it's harder to convince certain people to film themselves and, kind of get that out. On the job training is 100% the most recommended. So we're going to give them some of the procedures to review, or we may discuss them with them, making sure that, we're covering the basis so that they have an understanding. And most importantly, they always have an understanding of where they can go for more information. So that's the starting point. And then from there, we would task a supervisor, a team lead, like we said, a peer that we really think is showing good leadership and good practice of all of the operations and safety procedures. We would then sort of stick them together like a buddy system, and we would provide that mentor with a checklist, whether it be an observation checklist or just an ongoing training, and just making sure that they're hitting all the marks as they're doing the tasks. It kind of goes with that tell, show, do mentality of how we best learn. They can go through, not only are they learning the task operationally and from a skill perspective, but we make sure that those safety components are integrated into that training experience. And I find that that's an approach that I like to take throughout the program, is when you integrate the safety into the operations, we can kind of sneak it in there. We're tricking people when we don't call it safety training. But it really is a full circle approach that impacts the business in a really positive way.
Nice. Well, in a moment, I'm going to ask you about a Cinderella story of one of your clients. But before we do that, we're going to take a quick break.
Are you running a business over 7 figures but still struggling with technology headaches? Pay attention, you do not want to miss this offer. This podcast episode is brought to you by Awareness Strategies, who is offering a custom-built digital adoption roadmap for anyone running a business over 7 figures who's wanting to grow their business in the next 5 years. And it's not just a roadmap, they offer full implementation as well if that scares the out of you. Check out awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap for more details today. The link's in the show's notes. Don't regret not doing this. Do it now. That's awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap.
So I am super excited to hear an example of a Cinderella story of one of your clients.
All right. Well, it's really helpful that they were one of my first really exciting clients. I love talking about them. And they came to me. I actually somehow got them through cold calling. I know we all know that that's not the most fun experience, but it turned out positively for them and me. And they happen to be working towards a core certificate, like I mentioned, going through an audit process to be certified as a safe working company. And they got to a point where they just hit like a wall, and they had all the documents in place. Like I say, that really lengthy manual, they did all the writing, and then they were stuck. They were overwhelmed. The next part of the process is to demonstrate that you've been executing on all of the components that you wrote about in that manual. And the person at the company that was responsible for this was one of those people, like I said. They were also responsible for sales and scheduling and managing the team and bookkeeping and accounting. And at the end of the day, the safety was just getting pushed further and further down in the priority list. So I was able to come in. They had a great program established, and just manage the execution of it and take that weight off of feeling that looming pressure of like, oh yeah, we got to get that done. We got to get onto that safety stuff. And I know that the individual was very relieved. And I think that was one of my most fulfilling moments is watching them on the video call when I was like, yes, this is all taken care of. The forms are assigned, you're on track, the audit is in process, and we were able to get it done and pass them on their first round. And I think I physically saw a weight just lift off of their shoulders. And that
Right?
was a major, major moment for me.
Nice. You gotta love that. So yeah, talk to me about kind of the importance of it because I don't know if people kind of really realize how beneficial it is to a business. Um, it does affect your bottom dollar. It affects your employees' happiness, and like what else does it affect? And kind of what else have you seen happen with those?
Yeah, I really like to encourage people to start looking at safety as a part of the whole circle of your business. And quite often it's kind of this little satellite that's floating around rather than a part of the ecosystem. And a couple reasons for that. And you mentioned employee satisfaction. And I think that's a really, we hear that a lot, employee retention, but what does that mean? And I think there's two sides of it. For the employee, it's knowing that the actions are going to be taken that they need to be taken care of. They feel heard because there's a lot of ongoing communication between employees and management in the safety program. And when it's a full safety, fully executed safety program, those employees believe like, they do really care about this. This isn't just a box checking exercise. They listen to the feedback that we're giving them and they make the changes to keep being better. For the company on that side is, a lot of the times we hear the argument and like safety takes too long and it's an inconvenience. And absolutely, there are parts of it that can. And the goal is to kind of integrate those, like I said, into your processes and remove those inconveniences. But I also urge employers to think about who are the people that you want on your team that are willing to put in those details, pay attention, and have a good execution on that. I think it also speaks volumes to their quality of work and their type of employee. That also seems to impact when we're hiring contractors and things like that. I hear a lot of, general contractors, they're hiring sub trades and like, well, if they have a safety program, they're too expensive. Or if we ask them for all this stuff, they won't do it. And again, I speak to like, what is the bigger picture here? What is the quality of work that you're getting? What is the customer experience that they are going to have, which ultimately represents you? And, what is their attention to detail? And when you think about those things, it's just another thing that we can add to the vetting process to really get the highest quality of work from both our subcontractors and our employees, which is going to, increase our business value and just put our best foot forward from a full circle approach.
Nice. Well, and some of the companies that I have experienced with good safety programs with the mentorship that you've mentioned have some of the best cultures. It's like their employees stay with them for years and years and years, and they're really good. And new people want to get on with them because they understand that they're going to have a quick learning curve because somebody's going to be there showing them, talking to them, watching them doing all these things and that it becomes a lifestyle, not just or a career, not just a job that they're applying for, which makes a huge difference to businesses' bottom line and to their top line.
Yeah, absolutely. That's 100% right. And like you say, it speaks to their culture. And again, sometimes I hear the word safety culture, and we have this tendency to try to pull it away from the full picture of the company. And the reality is your culture is your culture. There's no different piece to it. It's all together. And yeah, it adds to it, and it can very quickly take away from it as well if we don't have that positive experience in an organization with their safety culture.
Nice. Well, I know our listeners are going to want more from you. How did they start that journey with you?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to connecting and have a LinkedIn page. Our company is Safety Comply, one word. And we also have an Instagram account, also Safety Comply. And if they'd like to check out our website, we have a sign up for newsletter emails as well as access to free resources and upcoming webinars. And that is safetycomply.ca.
Nice. I love it. We will have, of course, all of Elizabeth's links in the show notes. So go ahead and scroll down, click on the links, open up in a new browser because we're not done yet. So, Elizabeth, I get to ask you, at what point in life did you know you're a special kind of crazy enough to think that you could become an entrepreneur?
That's a great question. I would say I got the bug a couple of years ago. I was in a position where I was top level at an organization, and we were, I was handling a lot of things. Like I said, I was in that role, and I got a lot of exposure to strategic business decision and planning. And then I took the leap about a year ago, thinking I've done everything. I can do this. I have all the experience that you need in a business. And I think what I realized at that point was just that I was in a place where I knew I could be a good leader and even maybe better than the leader that I was experiencing. And so that's why I took the leap, and I want to make that impact and make that change and provide an opportunity for other people to come to a healthy organization.
Oh, that's fantastic. We're glad you did. You've been awesome. Any last words for our peeps?
I would just encourage people that no matter the type of organization or work that you do, health and safety has a place. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be scary. And there's a lot of support out there. And it helps your business, and it helps you with some peace of mind as well.
Thank you so much for your time, Elizabeth. I appreciate it, and I know how valuable it is.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Peeps, this is Michelle Nedelec. Thank you for being here with us today. Be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your friends. We love helping entrepreneurs grow.
Are you running a business over 7 figures but still struggling with technology headaches? Pay attention, you do not want to miss this offer. This podcast episode is brought to you by Awareness Strategies, who is offering a custom-built digital adoption roadmap for anyone running a business over 7 figures who's wanting to grow their business in the next 5 years. And it's not just a roadmap, they offer full implementation as well if that scares the out of you. Check out awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap for more details today. The link's in the show's notes. Don't regret not doing this. Do it now. That's awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap.